Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. Burmese journalists face 14-year imprisonment. Indonesia's corruption watchdog names parliamentarians as graft suspects. Court sentences activists for working to overthrow government in Vietnam. India sees further protests regarding Caste Act. Nepal sees alarming rise in rape cases. Mindanao fact-finding team harassed by soldiers. Urgent appeal from Indonesia. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I'm Kavyanjali Shukla. This week, Just Asia begins with Burma, where two journalists face up to 14 years in prison under the country's Colonial Era Secrets Act. The two journalists brought to light a massacre of 10 Muslim Rohingya men in Rakhine state's Indian village. They were subsequently arrested in December 2017 after they met with two police officers who handed them some rolled-up papers. Human rights groups have accused the police of entrapping the two journalists by handing them the documents which the reporters never had a chance to look at. For the past 3 months, the two Reuters reporters, Uwa Lone and Kwa So O, hear one or other witnesses testify against them weekly on the charge of violating Burma's Official Secrets Act. This week, the judge will decide whether the prosecutor has presented sufficient evidence for the case to go to trial. Sean Bain, a legal advisor in Yangon for the Geneva-based International Commission of Jurists, said the prosecution had not produced credible evidence. He urged the government to step in and dismiss the case. Human rights groups worldwide have condemned the case, noting the Burmese government's crackdown on free speech in the country. Next, Indonesia's corruption watchdog has named 38 Legislative Council members in North Sumatra as graft suspects. Earlier, on March 29th, the corruption watchdog, known as the KPK, has sent a notification letter to the North Sumatra legislative speaker about the investigation of the case. This investigation is part of the graft case involving North Sumatra's former governor, Mr. Gatot Pujo Nugroho, who was found guilty last year of corruption by the Medan Anti-Corruption Court. The judges stated that Mr. Gatot had paid Rupiah 61.8 billion in bribes to members of North Sumatra's Legislative Council to smoothen deliberations on the provincial budget. The court had sentenced Gatot to 3 years imprisonment, while his wife was given 2 years, 6 months imprisonment, as well as a fine of 150 million rupiah each. This case is one of many corruption cases involving state apparatus in Indonesia, particularly local authorities. It is unfortunate that despite prosecution and punishment by the Anti-Corruption Court, there has been little impact in deterring other state apparatus from corrupt activities. As a result, public trust in the government is being undermined. At the same time, corruption is undermining Indonesia's rule of law and democracy. Six human rights activists in Vietnam have been sentenced to between 7 and 15 years imprisonment. The Hanoi People's Court gave the longest sentence to human rights lawyer Nguyen Van Dai for trying to overthrow the people's administration. The judgment comes amid a wider government crackdown on peaceful dissent that has seen several bloggers and human rights activists given long jail sentences in the last 12 months. The 5 men and 1 woman sentenced were accused by the Vietnamese government of founding and being part of the Brotherhood for Democracy, a network of peaceful rights activists and democracy advocates. The Communist Party of Vietnam has ruled the country as an effective one-party state since the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. Among those sentenced on Thursday were bloggers, journalist, entrepreneur, and human rights worker. According to state media, all of them will face up to 5 years under house arrest after they finish their prison sentence. Amnesty International estimates there are at least 97 prisoners of conscience currently being held at Vietnamese jails. In India, the protests surrounding the dilution of the Caste Atrocities Act continued in many parts of the country. Another nationwide strike was once called on Tuesday, this time by several upper caste groups, to protest the earlier violence of the April 2nd strike. Bihar saw particular violence with several people injured. A nationwide advisory was issued to ensure adequate security measures on Tuesday, April 10th. On April 3rd, the Supreme Court refused to stay the March 20th judgment diluting the provisions of the caste law, while hearing a review petition saying that it is safeguarding the interest of innocents. Just Asia speaks to Basil Fernando, Director of Programs and Policy Development at the AHRC, for his views.
The recent case decided by the Indian Supreme Court on Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention Act, where the court has held that this law has been very much abused, is a great setback for Indian democracy and also for the issue of protection of minorities, particularly the Dalits. It has been a long struggle that made it possible to have this law, and it was because the enormity of the abuses that arise out of prejudices, and the prejudices being based on caste. It was considered natural to treat the Dalits and also the tribal people as some kind of a semi-human category, and to abuse their rights was not considered abuse at all. And this situation has not greatly changed. Throughout India, the abuse of the rights of the people who belongs to these categories are happening every day by way of murders, by way of rapes, by way of abusing their rights related to wages and all that. The large section of these among the Dalits are still doing the most menial types of jobs, such as carrying of human excreta on their own heads. Such an atrocious situation is a shame for India, and when everything should be done in order to eradicate this, the impact of the Supreme Court judgment will be to reduce the pressure for a radical change towards equality, but in fact to promote inequality. That the Supreme Court of India goes to the to support the increase of inequality in India is extremely sad situation. If there is abuse of any law which has criminal consequences, the abuse is possible only because of the inefficiency and the ineffectiveness of the police. So, if there is any abuse, what need to be corrected is the improvement of criminal investigations, whereby if there are any mala fide applications that could be eliminated at the very stage of the investigations, and this apply to all laws, not just only scheduled caste and scheduled tribe related laws. The problem that Indian politicians and the Indian courts do not want to touch is the backward nature of the Indian police. The greatest obstacle to Indian democracy is the Indian police, and this is due to this has a long history, but the question is that it is where the correction should be. developing the capacity of the police to distinguish between genuine complaint and complaint that may not be genuine is what police all over the world does when there are complaints. Now, Indian police is no exception, but there is a kind of a acceptance that correcting the Indian police, modernizing the Indian police, bringing the Indian police to a standard that is equal to the police elsewhere now in the world is impossibility. To this extent, abuse of any law is possible, and we know that many laws are being abused in India. Corruption is the clearest example. If the Supreme Court were to touch any abuse of law, the first it should have touched is the issue of widespread corruption, and that corruption spread also to the police, and sadly there are reports of constant reports of corruption in the related to courts themselves. Now, these are the crying problems of India, but the Supreme Court, unfortunately in this particular case, has not dared to deal with the real problems that will bring benefit to everybody in India, but instead it touch a law which will bring greater suffering to a very large section of Indian people consisting as scheduled tribes and scheduled caste. Therefore, we cannot expect anything good to come out of this judgment. All that will happen is a greater abuse of the rights of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, expecting also for impunity to follow.
Moving to Nepal, there is an alarming increase of rape in the country. According to police data, 711 cases of rapes were reported in 2011 to 2012, while 1,644 cases were reported in 2016 to 2017. The average number of reported cases per month has increased to 137 from 59 between 2012 and 2017. Recent months have seen an alarming increase in rape cases. Moreover, the actual number could be much higher as many rape cases remain unreported. The reported ones are also manipulated and are not kept in police records due to pressure from people in power. The maximum penalty for rape under Nepal's penal code is 20 years. Many believe that the absence of strict laws is the main reason behind the increasing incidents. There are stories of judges acquitting perpetrators, of police refusing to file cases, and stories of state representatives forcing women to get married to their rapists. Most of the victims are denied justice due to the lack of seriousness and sensitivity of the police and other authorities. When the rest of the world is talking about #MeToo, the conversation is reaching nowhere in Nepal. The government of Nepal must take strong action to end rape. The government must come up with strategies to safeguard rape victims and ensure an environment where all victims can lodge their case without any fear or intimidation. In the Philippines, state security forces repeatedly blocked members of a fact-finding mission investigating human rights violations in Mindanao. Since their arrival at the airports in Davao City, Laguindanangan and Butuan City on April 6, all the way to highly militarized peasant and Lumad communities in southern Mindanao, northern Mindanao and the Caraga region, members of the three-team mission were subjected to different forms of harassment and intimidation. Rafael Mariano, former Agrarian Reform Secretary and head of the Northern Mindanao team, said, "We came here for a very urgent reason. We came here to verify mounting reports of rights abuse against peasant and Lumad communities perpetrated allegedly by military elements. No wonder the military people do not want us here." President Rodrigo Duterte placed the whole island under martial law in May 2017 after an attack in Marawi, citing continued threat of terrorism and rebellion. Duterte asked Congress to extend martial law until December this year. Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features one case from Indonesia. A young man watching and recording a protest in front of the Luwak Banggai Parliament building was hit by a stray bullet after fighting between the protesters and police officers broke out. Aldi Prasetya was hit by the bullet in his forehead. At the hospital, doctors said he was bleeding into his brain and could be in a coma for a long time. While Aldi's mother continues seeking justice, the police and local authorities have forced her to accept money and stop her demands. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.alrc.asia/justasia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.